presenter to do another hour with us. So we've got Dr. Elizabeth Osborn, who's the Director of Education at the Indiana University Center on Representative Government. She is part of the team that's created the award-winning Free Civics Interactive Engaging Congress. Dr. Osborn develops and directs all the professional development offered by the center, including building a national cohort of teachers using Engaging Congress and incorporating civics into their daily teaching. Dr. Osborn received her PhD in U.S. history from Indiana University. And before joining the center, she was the creator of the Indiana Supreme Court's nationally recognized education outreach program, Courts in the Classroom. In addition, she's taught at several IU locations, served as a teaching consultant at Indiana University in Bloomington, and has taught high school social studies. So in this session, Dr. Osborn will showcase the teaching modules that the Center on Representative Government offers to help educators teach government, focusing on their newest module about the executive branch. And so the Indiana Bar Foundation's please introduce Dr. Elizabeth Osborn. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope that we all have some great ideas spinning in our head from Dr. Adler. And as he was talking, so many of the different things that he talked about, we have addressed in the latest model of Engaging Congress. So hopefully I'm clicking away here, and I will apologize. One of the things that you'll see is that you would not believe this laptop that I have. Believe it or not, the camera is right here in the middle. So it's like always pointing kind of at your belly button, but also that means it's like your fingers look like they are, sorry, I can't talk and start the presentation too. So it always looks like you have spider fingers crawling over the screen as you're talking. So I apologize that in advance. In addition to my external monitors not working, my keyboard and mouse that are external aren't working. And IT spent an hour and a half remoting in today and couldn't fix it. And I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I was personally got great satisfaction that after an hour and a half, they admitted that they couldn't fix it too. So, they didn't think it was operator error, turn it on, turn it off, do all those things. So we'll see if we can get it fixed later this week. But in the meantime, you'll just have to see my spider fingers, and I'll muddle along with screen sharing without having my second screen. So like Tim said, I work for the Indiana University Center on Representative Government. A few of you I saw out there have been to our various PDs in the past, or I think in Janet's case, I don't want to say way in the past, but I think that she came to the courtroom when I was still doing a lot of student simulations and teacher programs up at the court. So it was nice seeing you, and nice meeting all the rest of you are here. And I hope that you'll learn some resources that are out there that you weren't aware of that you can take back immediately to your classroom. So the center's was founded by Lee Hamilton, who is here in this gorgeous picture with President Obama back in 1999. And our mission is essentially to develop better informed and prepared and ready to take action citizens. And that's not just like working with students and educators, but working with adults as well. So we have a variety of programs, including a few that are listed here on the screen. We have monthly columns that on representative government, and on our webpage, you can sign up for those. Congressman Hamilton does a fantastic job. He is part of what I call kind of the last generation that embraced the principles of the founders in terms that they were willing to listen to each other, to negotiate, to compromise, and not just get into these hardened partisan positions. That doesn't mean that they weren't partisan, because absolutely, they were all partisan at some time or another. But on the big picture and in the big running of our government, they weren't so dedicated to partisan positions that they wouldn't change their mind. And I feel that this was really the principles of the founders that we've lost so much. And if you're talking to your students, this is like a great way to explain to them about why the Constitutional Convention decided to close the windows and lock the doors. Because if those delegates had been exposed to the daily commentary of the people around them, they might not have been willing to make the compromises that they were willing to make when they could listen to each other behind closed doors and hear the arguments, and then maybe change their position because they felt like there was a better way. Today, if any politicians change their positions, they're crucified in the press and called flip-floppers and all these things. And that really like represents a failure of our current understanding of how government works. So sorry, that is my, I guess, my little soapbox. But since most of you guys are here, you probably feel some of the same frustration with our leaders at all levels of government. And, you know, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're disappointed. So I work primarily in the K-12 side of the center. So in the K-12 side, what we focus on is developing free resources for teachers to use in their classroom to teach their students the principles of representative government, and hopefully to really teach them those critical skills of being able to identify bias, to recognize their own bias, to like research a question on their own, not to just like listen. I have some fourth grade granddaughter, and like the things that come out of her mouth are just pure reflection of like her, you know, her other grandparents. We assume like, you know, that COVID is a hoax, you know, those sort of things. And you ask them, well, why is COVID a hoax? And they just say, I don't know, because that's what they heard coming from their parents. And that's one of the biggest things we as teachers battle, is those ideas of kids being able to think on their own. So that's really the heart of all of our material, is really to build those critical thinking skills, and within it also inundate them these principles of representative government, with the total end objective is for them to be not only informed citizens, but citizens who are willing to take action, right? We want them to go out there and be involved. I'm totally passionate about this topic, as probably a lot of you can tell. And I think teachers are passionate about this topic too. And I'm always telling teachers that I think they undersell sometimes how they model civic behavior to their students, and that their students are so civically engaged whenever they're in high school. Not just fabulous things like participating in We the People or Project Citizen or mock trial or mock UN, but running for student government, organizing a club, doing a canned food drive. All those things are the roles of citizens that we want them to translate into adulthood, and they don't. Like, why do you have the person who's the president of the senior class not ever run for any kind of local office when they're out of high school? I mean, that's that disconnect that we need to branch as teachers. They're already doing that behavior. Just try to encourage them to carry that into adult life. So now that I've like given you my whole soapbox speech, I'll kind of talk about some more particular things about what we're going to do today. So the Engaging Congress project is a part of the Library of Congress's Teaching with Primary Sources, or just TPS project. They call it the Civics Interactives Project. And there are about 12 different civics interactives that they have funded. And now I don't want you all to get on your phones and go look for them right now, but please do go to loc.gov and look at the teachers page, and then look at the resources. The three latest ones, the latest one that is just pretty new is by a company called Fablevision, and it's called Civics the Musical. And it's kind of captures on this popularity of Hamilton, where the students like pick an issue and then they go through and they like create this dialogue. And then at the end, the computer generates the people like singing their dialogue in a Hamilton type moment. So really cool. There's also a DB Quest by iCivics, which is kind of like close reading of primary source documents. There's a K5 one. I know we have at least one elementary teacher on here, Lisa, who's a fifth grade teacher, so she might be more interested in engaging Congress, but Kid Citizen is a great thing to walk elementary kids through, where they pick up things and put them in their backpack and they have a journal. They talk. So there's about 12 different projects out there. So I just encourage you to look at those others for ideas that you might be able to use. So we're going to actually look at Engaging Congress, and we're going to analyze some resources within it. And then I'm also going to show you some other free resources of the center. So Joseph is going to launch the poll question, and I am going to stop sharing and reshare going to the internet. So while I'm doing this, Joseph is going to launch the poll question. So again, this is like I can't talk and do this at the same time. So my question here is, what access do you and your students have to the internet and digital resources? So I hope you're going on and answering that. I don't know if, usually it shows at the bottom what percentage of people have answered the questions. Are you guys seeing the poll question? Are you?
Yeah, it looks like we got 10 votes in, which is probably close to what we have here. So we'll go
Okay.
ahead and stop it and let everybody see the results here.
All right, maybe I'm seeing it wants me to answer the poll question too. Share the results. Okay, oh, look, 70% of you are at schools with 1-to-1. That is awesome. That is incredible. I think Indiana is really doing a good job at trying to get computers into the hands of kids, or devices of one kind or another. 20% have a bring your own device. And then, so it looks like everybody has some access to some kind of computer or technology, which is great. And this is something I think that COVID has probably really helped some of the school districts, because some of that emergency funding and stuff has helped provide hotspots and devices for people. So what I'm going to do, and look, it worked. We shared our screen. We left the PowerPoint for a minute. And what I thought I'd do is I just do a quick tour around some of the items here on the library. So used to saying Library of Congress, since they funded us in part for so long. But this is the Center on Representative Government's website. And you can see we have this scrolling screen that shows right there at the top some of the different programs we have. But I am going to go ahead and click on the resources link. And here's where you're going to have my spider fingers, guys. And I'm going to click on teachers, because from the teachers, you can go over to the side menu and access most of the things that I wanted to show you. So what I wanted to start with is I wanted to start with the interactives. And so we have a series of interactives besides engaging Congress. We also have Citizen, which is an interactive game that focuses on primary sources and content from Indiana to teach national issues. So this is really good for like whenever it's fabulous. I'm going to show you a video. I'm partial about everything, of course, but I'm going to show you some examples. We actually use it when we do PDs all over the United States, because if we didn't tell them that all the primary sources were people from Indiana, they wouldn't know, because they just represent all of the issues happening in the nation at this time, with, a few exceptions. So we also have these interactive learning modules that were originally created in Flash. Here, I forget that we've got this little note here that says we're on it. These were developed in Flash, and we're slowly, as we have money, moving them out of Flash. But these are some of our most used ones. So we did them first. So the legislative process, how members decide to vote, federal budget, and then criticism of Congress. So that there's more of these, but we have to get the funds to kind of develop them as we go along. So what I want to do right here is I just want to I'm going to skip down here to our YouTube channel. Well, it's actually not right here. It's not our YouTube channel because it's our video links, but it links to things on our video channel, because here, well, theoretically, it's going to populate and have videos. And if not, I'm going to choose a different option. But we have, here they're slowly loading up. So Freedom Summer, I'm going to talk about in a minute, because it's our latest project that just launched. It's actually a revamp. We totally redid it. When Freedom Summer was first built, before I came to the center, so before, 2015, I think 2005 to 10-ish, there wasn't any ability to really build in video. So the original Freedom Summer, believe it or not, the video was actually a very fast PowerPoint, set on 1 second, so that the slides advanced, and that's how they created a video. So we've totally redone it and made it interactive, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. Citizens Unite is one of our most popular videos. As a matter of fact, the Lou Fry Institute in Florida has it as a key resource on their guide. So essentially, these two characters go through several scenarios where they talk about how to actively engage as a citizen in our representative democracy. And even though it's probably, first created with the idea that it would be 5th through 7th, even the high schoolers like it, because, high schoolers kind of like to, they know that it's younger than them, but they still enjoy it, and the content is just as good. Lunch with Dr. Broccoli was truly made for like the 4th to 6th grade thing, and it's really talks about the art and the importance of compromise. So again, these are these principles of representative government that you have to, learn how to work through your problems together and reach consensus and then agree to abide by the decision. This one is hysterical because Dr. Broccoli, kind of our Dr. Phil type guy, the people who are on the couch with him are all these animals. And the problem is that the lion just looks at them all and thinks that they're food. So the basic issue is that the lion just wants to eat them. And so how are we going to like compromise and work around this situation, which you can see is kind of difficult when the lion's basic point is he thinks you're food and wants to eat you. You have to reach some sort of compromise here. We're going to talk about engaging Congress in a minute, but I'm going to go down to Citizen here because I just want to show you one of the Citizen videos. So I'm going to show you 5 because I just love the music on 5 here. One of the things about all of our interactives, including Freedom Summer, Engaging Congress, and Citizen, is all the components can be used individually. So if you just wanted to use one of the videos from any one of our interactives, you just play the video that day. You don't have to like get in, go through a process, do anything. You just pick the one that, fits whatever you're teaching that day. So I am going to try to play this one for you.
Despite fears of another depression, post-World War II America experienced a period of continuing economic growth and affluence. The grateful nation provided returning veterans access to the middle class with GI Bill education benefits for college tuition and housing loans through the Veterans Administration. Similarly, working-class families benefiting from high-paying factory jobs were able to send their children to college, often for the first time. Universities across Indiana had to build temporary housing to meet the demand. This prosperity was not, however, equally accessible to all Hoosiers. African Americans continued to face social and legal obstacles to achieving their American dream. Women, too, were battling to maintain and advance the economic and social opportunities of the war years. Racial unrest, the erosion of high-paying factory jobs as a result of foreign competition, Cold War tensions with the Soviet Union, the Vietnam War, and Watergate left many Hoosiers disillusioned and uncertain about the future as the era drew to a close. How does Indiana continue to progress in divisive times?
Okay, so now this is the part I never know about how I want to get back to the main video screen. Here we go. So I hope you see that this is such a good content video for talking about that period, and all of those primary sources that you saw flash across the screen are all from Indiana. So they're all Hoosiers. So if you were teaching about that era, you could be using those pictures from Indiana factories. You could be using those pictures of Indiana veterans. You saw those pictures were from Ball State, the ones like we marched to support Birmingham. I believe those are from the archives at Ball State. I love the pictures of the first generation of kids going to college and stuff. So the idea whenever we built Citizen is that you could teach Indiana history parallel to American history and use examples that the kids could relate to show how Indiana is a part of these national trends. And I just think these videos are amazing. Every time I watch them, I love that 50s little time there whenever it's right or whatever. And that's a picture from Dunn Meadow and Bloomington where all those camper trailers are set up. So just all sorts of neat things. So I'm this one of my coworkers pinging me oh no, what's happening? Am I looking really terrible on screen? Did I show something wrong? So that is Citizen. I showed you the interactives a little bit. Now I want to go back and just give you a little sneak peek of Freedom Summer. And Freedom Summer really focuses on the civil rights movement of 1964. Now, Citizen and Engaging Congress have a very strong focus on visual analysis of primary sources. You know, all of our primary sources and almost all of our interactives, as many as we can, come from the Library of Congress or other free archives. And on the websites that are connected with all of these projects, we have links back to the home of where those primary sources are. So for example, if you wanted to, you know, create, I'm like, my mind is like primary source sets where you can do sorted activities and jigsaw activities and things, you could actually go back and like print those out. Like, you know, when you're in your classroom and you actually get to see your students and let them touch and feel stuff. But so on the websites, we always give you access to those primary sources. So those have a lot of the visual analysis skills, the ability to look at the map or the chart or the political cartoon and read with what you're seeing in front of you and draw conclusions so that you don't necessarily have to have any content knowledge to be able to do your analysis. Freedom Summer is a little bit different. It's a little bit more reading literacy based. So they have the great image that goes with it, but then we also have them answer questions based on the content that they read and answer the questions. So again, it's all primary source based, all self-contained, that you can do it within, like all the information they need to know to answer the Freedom Summer questions are in what they're reading in front of them. So I always tell people that you can use any of these things as either skill builders, if you just want to work on building your kids' critical thinking skills so they can, you know, read a Tylenol label, they can read a ballot, they can read a paragraph and understand it, or you can use it as a combination of a content and skill building. So I'm going to click on the Freedom Summer intro. I'm actually going to go backwards some. I'm going to go back up here to resources and I'm going to go to interactives because I don't want to just show the video. I want to actually go to the Freedom Summer module. So I'm back on the interactives page here, just under resources. And I'm going to click on Freedom Summer. It just launched 2 weeks ago on March 30th, which was the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment, the amendment that prohibited abridgment of the vote based on race or condition of previous servitude. I have to say, I was kind of laughing when I say we launched it on the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment, because initially we were aiming for Martin Luther King Day. Then we were aiming for Black History Month. Well, didn't get done any of those. So thank goodness we found another important civil rights anniversary that we could launch it on. So I'm going to have this open in a new tab here. Okay, so I'm going to go to Freedom Summer, and this is the web page for Freedom Summer, and almost all of our interactives that we've developed, you can either play through the web, which is what we're going to do here in a minute, or your students, your kids, I call them kids, sorry, your kids can download them through the various app stores, or your IT people can. So if you have a classroom set of iPads or your kids all have iPads, you would download them, or if you have Google tablets, you use Google Play, you download them. So one of the great things about that is that once they're downloaded, your kids don't need internet or data. So any of those excuses of like, oh, I don't have good internet. Well, once it's downloaded as an app, it's contained in the device. They don't have to have internet and they don't have to have data. Because it always cracks me up how they tell me, oh, I can't do this, I don't have data, but they manage to like communicate with their friends and play games and everything all the time. But they're kids, it's their jobs to try to make excuses, right? Or if you have Chromebooks, tablet, or Chromebooks or other laptop type devices, or even just your teacher computer unit, you would play on the web. And when you play on the web, it does go to this place called Simmer for right now, which is just a free web development state. And it does have some games over on the side, but once they get in, hopefully we keep them focused, and we're working on doing that. It does take a few minutes to load because it has so much video content in it. So just give it a minute here. I always try to be patient and not click, 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 click. You can see it spinning there. This is where the tap dance part comes in. I can't see if you have any questions because I like lose my view whenever I have my share screen up. So I assume if things we're saying. Okay, so here is the menu comes up, and whenever you hit begin, it's going to launch the video.
By the 1960s, the civil rights movement had been in full gear for almost a decade. But institutionalized discrimination against blacks remained part of everyday life, especially in the South, and violence against blacks was escalating. 1963 resulted in significant new momentum for the movement, and media coverage increased awareness across the nation of the ongoing violence. Governor George Wallace tried to defy the course by refusing to integrate Alabama schools and universities. President Kennedy sent civil rights legislation to Congress. Civil rights activist Medgar Evers was gunned down in his own driveway. An estimated 250,000 people attended the March on Washington, a peaceful rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., to hear Martin Luther King, John Lewis, Philip Randolph, and others advocate for the civil and economic rights of blacks. Tragically, 1963 ended with the assassination of the sitting president. Newly sworn-in President Lyndon Baines Johnson actively pursued Kennedy's civil rights agenda. Building on this momentum in the summer of 1964, civil rights organizers recruited thousands of volunteers to help register black voters. The campaign was focused on a state with one of the largest black populations in the country and a horrific record of minority persecution: Mississippi. This project came to be known as Freedom Summer and was marked by blood, tragedy, and triumph. Freedom Summer volunteers, many of them young white college students, traveled south to register eligible voters, teach young black students in freedom schools, and most importantly, to draw attention from the media. At the same time, back in Washington, D.C., supporters were hard at work pushing the Civil Rights Bill through the House and the Senate. The majority of blacks throughout the South, and especially in Mississippi, lived in poverty. Racists used Jim Crow laws, brutality, and murder to shut out black voters and maintain oppression. The Freedom Summer mission was to shatter the status quo once and for all.
I don't know about you guys, but every time I watch that, I don't want to say I get choked up or get emotional, but it just strikes a chord in me. And I think one of the things, the reason it strikes such a powerful chord in me is I feel like we're living in this same situation. I mean, now instead of it in Mississippi, I feel like it's in Minnesota. Like when I, saw the news yesterday about that other young black man being shot, I mean, I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, why is this keep on happening? Why can't we get out of this loop? And I feel like your students are probably asking you those questions, or they're thinking about those questions. And that is, really one of the principles of all of the content that we try to do is these issues that we raise in our resources. Not only should they learn these issues for the sake of being well informed about the history of our country, but also to see that these issues are not settled yet, that these are ongoing issues of our government. And for our government to succeed and to continue and prosper, they are the next generation that has to deal with these issues as well. I mean, I think maybe naively for a long portion of my life, I thought, we don't have the civil rights movement. We don't have Vietnam. I mean, I'm really a child of the 80s. So the AIDS crisis was really, one of the big, pivotal things of our generation of where people were being discriminated against. But, I've really seen how, we're still struggling with these issues of equity and especially race. And I think I tell my husband all the time, who is not a historian at all, and he rolls his eyes at me, of all the places in the country where I would have thought that this, the racial issue would jump to national prominence and now stay in national prominence is Minnesota. I mean, this is where I wish I could see all your faces and we were in our usual group so I could be saying Minnesota and seeing if you guys are nodding too, like if they come from Mississippi or Alabama, you're like, oh, it's the South, we're still having this problem. But Minnesota, right? But that just shows how endemic it is. And it's just so Freedom Summer speaks to every generation, those images, and that these people like John Lewis, like if we got to the end of the playing through Freedom Summer, there's also an outro video, which then takes 1965 to present. And one of the images, one of the benefits of it not launching for Martin Luther King Day is Amanda Gorman. And we were able to put Amanda Gorman into that video vignette. But also we have John Lewis walking across the Pettus Bridge, arm in arm with the Obamas, with the Bushes right next to them. So again, this idea of bringing it to the present. The other thing that's really good about, well, I think everything, that's like my thing. But one of the other things that is like great for like showing you Freedom Summer today, besides the fact I'm gonna like skip our introduction of how to play, is that this kind of connects with our issue of the executive, because one of the things that I was really focused on teaching with this particular interactive are the events of the civil rights movement in connection with the legislature and the executive branch. So often whenever we teach things, we teach, here we start with, Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. We move to Martin Luther King and assassination of King. And we talk about all those things, right? And then we talk about the civil rights legislation and the Voting Rights Act. And I think a lot of times what students don't see is how interconnected these are. The day that George Wallace stands in front of the famous picture there at the University of Alabama, blocking the doorway, that very night is when, and I'm laughing at myself here because I'm being so dramatic, is that Kennedy goes on national television and gives that address saying, I am going to introduce civil rights legislation. Hours after Kennedy gives that speech is when Medgar Evers is shot in his own driveway. The NAACP organizer in Mississippi, that picture that they show of his wife and family. I mean, we're talking about a 48-hour period. And then during that summer is when the I Have a Dream speech happens, the bombing of the 16th Street church. All of those things are happening during the same period where that legislation is kind of sitting in Congress, not going anywhere, right? And then Kennedy is assassinated in November. And Robert Kennedy and LBJ take up the mantle of this civil rights legislation and start trying to use not only the tragedy of all these civil rights events that have happened in the summer, but also the tragedy of the assassination to try to move it forward. So this really shows your students, rather than the more traditional, how does a bill become a law type thing, the interconnection between these actions and really how Kennedy proposes this legislation. But he can't make it happen, right? And this is kind of that disconnect that our political campaigning process really does a disservice for people understanding how the process works, because Kennedy could make this impassioned plea and say he was going to support this, but then he can't make the leaders in the House or the Senate bring it to the floor, put it in, assign it to a committee, get it out of the committee, bring it to the floor for a hearing. All of that is, the control of the legislature. So what is the executive's role and how much can they do? If you remember in the video, which you probably don't because you've only seen it one time, but we love that picture of the Johnson treatment. It's the one where Johnson is leaning over to the congressman and trying to kind of bend him to his will. And that is really the role of the executive branch and legislation, is they can propose it and they can try to bend it to their will, but they can't make the legislature do it. So I think, that's a good thing leading into our executive branch. So here I'm showing you, this is one of the cards. And so here, this is the card where Kennedy is meeting with some of these representatives of the NAACP when he's having the call for civil rights. And then I have to move my picture of us over to the side. And here's where, okay, I want somebody to put the answer in. Now your students would read all this and you see we've got citations and hyperlinks, so we're being good role models. I want you guys to they would look at this picture, they'd read through this text, and then they would answer this question. And one of the things about these questions is they aren't just strictly content questions. They ask the students to be able to anticipate a little bit. The answer is not exactly up here. The content is here for them to read, and then, so they can't just go through and read until they see, there's the word that's the answer to the question. They have to be able to process it. So I know on your screens it might be kind of small, so I'll read it out loud and then put your answer in the chat. And Tim is going to call on someone by name if you guys don't put the answer in the chat. And it's okay if you get the wrong answer, because then I can demonstrate to you what we've done with the right and wrong answers. So you can just say you're going to get the wrong answer. So the congressional response to President Kennedy's call for civil rights legislation breaks down on party lines, breaks down on north-south lines, is mixed, with civil rights supporters declaring the bill too weak and segregationists opposing any legislation. So do we have someone who's taken a stab there, Tim? So look, even Tim.
I had to find my mouse to unmute myself. Not that I've seen yet, but I'm going to trust these teachers that might see something coming in here soon.
And remember, you don't have to get it right. Tim is not going to call out your name. I'm not going to know who it is. So I just need someone to tell me answer 1, 2, or 3.
We've got a few that have come in. There seems to be unanimous. They're voting for C, the third option.
Okay, C. And you know what? You think this is a trick question, right? You're like, what? That's got to be the answer. So it says, try again. Civil rights activists think that the Kennedy administration is doing too little too late, and segregationists oppose any civil rights legislation as an infringement on states' rights. So there's a better answer out there.
Well, now you're going to be confusing the audience here because everybody guessed C to begin with.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you here. So this one is discrimination was more entrenched in the South, but it is widespread in the North as well. So there was not that strict dichotomy. Like answer C has a lot of correct elements in it, but it's not the best answer. And the best answer is to point out that most Northern members of Congress reflect the view of their constituents and did not support civil rights legislation. We know the Southerners, we know the Dixiecrats were giving Kennedy a problem, and we know that the problem that he had to hold that Southern bloc, and one of the reasons he waited so long. But it's a very misnomer that the North was united in its support of civil rights. If you are in a position where you're teaching the whole span of American history, which, the way we have it broken up doesn't always happen, you could kind of parallel this with abolitionism during the Civil War era. Those abolitionists were the loudest and the proudest, but they only represented a small percentage of the Northern population. And for a long time, that was the same thing in the North. So now we have finished this card. So I'm going to click it out, and and you can see it's now put on a timeline, and we would have a next card. But what I'm going to do is kind of thinking of the idea of differentiated learning and kind of trying to move beyond just, one thing. We created this web view as well. Web meaning like a spider web, because you can see here is that this line, this web just was drawn between Kennedy and the White House. And as they work on each of the cards, they will then get put and draw these webbed connections between each other. So you can move between the two types of views. And there are, I think, 15 cards to play through. Here's the next card, and here is the Birmingham speech. So you can see our first one was about legislation in 1963, and now we're going to Martin Luther King in Birmingham. I'm going to close this because we're not going to do this whole thing. And I just want to show you that all of these important people, we have bios of them. And you would not believe the resolution here, how much better it is than the original. And also in the original, there were not any women and there were not as many Black people here as there were white people. Just the amount of new resources who are being digitized all the time is amazing. Fannie Lou Hamer's story and her connection is way deeper than I ever knew. We also have glossary terms, and so the glossary terms are hyperlinked for the students within, but at any time they can go through and read the glossary they have. And then also we have a gallery, as I was saying, of all of the images that are available for you to use. So as you can see, for example, we're limited somewhat in the images that we have, but you can see that because one of the things is non-copyright. Almost everything of Martin Luther King is still copyrighted. It's really hard. And one of the things that I know this is hard, but as teachers, I hope you're trying to be a good role model and not just grab things off Google and use them whenever they're not copyright free. When this is showing my age, and Janet, I know, had to go, but like when I first started teaching, that educational fair use was really easy because I just like printed off a picture and distributed it to my 35 kids, and that's all the further it went. So that was fair use. But now if you're putting them on lesson plans up in Google Classroom or posting them places, you're now beyond just your self-contained classroom. So it was really hard. But we did try to have, like, this is a poster for the missing civil rights workers. We have some newspaper stories. This is a great piece of art that this is in Montgomery or Birmingham. Like, where was the 16th Street Baptist Church? Someone help me because I'm having like a brain meltdown. But this is the park right across from the 16th Street Baptist Church where it was bombed and the girls died in the Sunday school room, the little girls. So in this park right across the street, this is also where the police were so horrendously brutal. And it's full of these larger than life sculptures of these events that were pictures that were captured and shown on TV and in Life magazine and everything. And so we tried to have a little bit of art here as well. So we have these resources for teachers. So that's all I'm going to show you with Engaging Congress, or with Freedom Summer. So we really developed it as this thing to try to make the connections between legislation and kind of the process of legislation and that interaction between the administration and the legislature, but also then the connections of what was happening on the ground in real life during this same time period. So I assume none of you are asking questions. I hope you're not asleep, that you are out there. But, and I appreciate you being here. I know you've been on Zoom way more than you want to, and it's the end of the day. So I appreciate you even hanging in there. So, and then this branches from kind of the executive implications of Freedom Summer and how you could use it if you were teaching the executive, to Engaging Congress, which is our fun, free, interactive resource for teaching the basic tenets of representative government. And we have, and I actually have a PowerPoint. Maybe I should go back to the PowerPoint for a minute. Hang on, I got to move my little screen here. I'll come back here in a moment, but let's go back to the PowerPoint. I never understand like why. Oh, this is where poll question 2 is supposed to come up, Joe. So as I transit between launching poll question 2. So go ahead, trying to shake up a little bit and see if you can do that. And so Tim or Joseph, just when you think that you have like 10 responses or whatever, just jump in and show us what the results are. The question was, do you currently use digital interactives? Yes, I use them a lot. I use one, two, but not a mainstay of something like in the So 1 or 2, 22% of you don't, use them at all. So hopefully after today, you can say at least you're adding Engaging Congress and Freedom Summer and Citizen into your toolbox and give you access to devices. So if you need help, one of our goals is that you can use this material and integrate into any part of what you're teaching. You don't just have to, I think I'm going the wrong way. So here's the Freedom Summer slides. Here's poll question 2. So here is Engaging Congress. So this is just a picture you can see here in this particular case. This is a classroom. In particular, this is a cart for this class. And if the students had finished their homework the night before, they were allowed to use their phones to play. So the teacher kind of used it as an incentive because they're not typically allowed to have their phones out in class. So it's this fun, free interactive that uses primary sources. It's formatted for Chromebooks, computers, tablets, mobile devices, like all the things that we
Sorry to interrupt here, Dr. Osborn, real quick. Just, I want to maybe take a quick pause because it almost feels like the internet, your voice is trying to catch up with the internet. So I'm just hoping that it's kind of breaking up a little bit. So well, maybe we'll just kind of pause, let that speed back up. But I also want to say right now we're still looking at the website and not the slides that you're showing yet. Oh, there we go. Dr. Osborn, I think we're breaking up a little bit there.
I am walking the location.
Yeah, as Gina says, we've all been there. We understand how Zoom works, and so you've got our grace to work through this here. So we'll see how this comes back. We'll give it another minute here, see if we can get Dr. Osborn back up and back on working with us. But I guess I just want to double check for those that in the chat there, if there's any other questions, either for us at this point or for Dr. Osborn that we could queue up if you wanted to have that there. So we're going to try to see what we can get back going. And that's a great question, Gina. I see that in your chat, and we'll see as Dr. Osborn keeps working through this. Has anybody had a chance to use any of the resources from the Center on Representative Government? Has anybody tried any of those and worked well in your classroom yet? So maybe this is new info for everybody, which is exciting. That's good. That's good too, because I personally have not done a whole lot with them, and so I'm excited to learn all of the new things here too, and right here in our backyard. Dr. Osborn, you're muted, so we'll see if we can get that.
You hear me now?
It's still a little sketchy in there, but it's coming back.
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
That's working well now.
Okay, so I had put in the chat box that maybe Joseph could share his screen. He has the PowerPoint as well, so maybe that would reduce my bandwidth if he played the PowerPoint, and I can also shut my video off.
Yeah, let's give that a try. There we go.
Okay. Okay, so my video is off and I've just got my audio on. So who knows? I've never really had this problem before. So go ahead and advance to the next slide, Joseph. Okay, so I was kind of where Tim stopped me was the idea we were talking about the different formats you could play it on. And I was going to emphasize that we really built this and some of our other interactives with the Library of Congress inquiry. Well, inquiry-based analysis is not, specific to the Library of Congress, but they have their own kind of analysis sheet that they use where they observe, reflect, question, stake a claim, pose a hypothesis, whatever is your particular one. But they do have a lot of resources on loc.gov and especially their teacher support pages. So next slide, please. I know we're now short on time since we had our favorite technology glitches. Okay, so here's an example of what it would look like if your students were playing on the app. So within each unit of Engaging Congress, we have 6 primary sources, a mini game, a short content video, and then knowledge check questions in addition to the analysis questions. So in the second little handheld view you have there is a primary source that's called First Vote with African Americans voting. And you would initially see it like it is in the top picture. You see the full picture and you get 3 thumbnails and you drag them over and drop them onto a part of the photograph. And then the photograph or the chart or the map kind of pops into the right place. And your students are able to pinch and pull and play with the screen. So they can zoom way in and look at the details, read all the text. And then the 3 questions that are asked are based only on what they're seeing in front of them. So in that way, it can be an introduction to some new content that they don't know yet. It can be a review of the content they know. You can use it just again to build their skills. Each of the primary sources has its own mini game, and compared to the mini games in Citizen, they seem pretty lame, except for the last 2 since they're new units, but we'll keep working on them. But this particular one on the federal budget isn't really that lame because it is using pie chart reading skills. And over there on the left, you see all the different major components of the federal budget. And the students have to guess how much of the budget is each of those different items, like interest on the debt, Social Security, international affairs. And then once they have filled out their budget on the pie chart, they submit it and they will get the real federal budget, I believe, from, I'm not even going to say because I can't remember right now, but it's fairly old because we've gone years without actually having a budget as opposed to continuing resolutions, which is a whole nother discussion. Next slide. So I'm not going to play the how to play Engaging Congress because we don't have time, and I'd rather play the executive branch content video for you. So we're going to go on to the next slide. But again, there is this video, How Do I Play Engaging Congress, which you can show your students or you yourself just look at before you show it to your students. Why should you use Engaging Congress or a tool like this? This is some testimonials that I got from a teacher who was using the game in Florida. And she had, after their students did the unit, she just asked them to write a short reflection about what they learned. And I thought this one was particularly powerful. She says, I knew that people did that back then, but I never really got into it and read about it like that. Also, it was nice to pick up a little more information about Ruby Bridges because I think that's a really inspiring story. Lastly, it was just nice to refresh my brain about the Constitution, the branches of government, and the amendments. So the part that I thought was really powerful is how she said, but I never really got into it. And now through this kind of interactive, being able to zoom in on the picture and learn more, that she got into it. And that's what we want our students. And we never, are upset if they say that it was glad to review the branches of government, because this is an 11th grade student. Next slide. And I believe the next slide is also a testimonial. And this is a much more complex image from Reconstruction. And the student, the thing that I have just underlined a few, I learned is that even today, certain groups are still restricted from voting. Another thing I learned was that white supremacists would attempt to do all they could to prevent African Americans from voting. And look down there at the bottom. Despite having all kinds of laws and constitutional amendments at the time to prevent this kind of behavior, white supremacists did everything in their power to prevent minorities from practicing their rights. Wow, that is what we want our students to know and realize and do something about. I can't remember what the next slide is at the moment, so whenever Joseph advances it for us here, this was just a testimonial about how beneficial it was about, using the budget scenario. So here she says, did you know that 47% federal income comes from income taxes? Go on. And so engaging Congress is adaptable for learners at all grade level. It was not made for A-push students, but you can certainly use it for A-push students by adapting it. You can also use it for English language learners. You can use the closed captioning. You can pick just the primary source in each unit that fits the ability level of your students. You can divide into groups and spread out the primary sources. You can do a primary source analysis as a group, all sorts of things that you can do to help integrate it into any topic you're teaching. Next slide. So here are the 5 topics of engaging Congress that we started with. And you can see they have those cute little titles to them. So we had to put underneath what it's really about. So Laws and Sausage is really about separation of powers. A Balancing Act is about the federal budget. Next slide. And here is what the main home screen of Engaging Congress looks like. And you can see there the 2 new branches or modules, the executive branch and the judicial system. And at this point, Joseph, I'm hoping that you can jump out, because I'm afraid since my internet has been unstable, if you can jump out, or even Tim, share your screen and go to that corg.iu.edu site or engagingcongress.org. If one of the 2 of you could do that.
Yep, give us one moment here.
I mean, I would try to do it, but we've already had problems. And you can see my next slide was I was going to have you do fill out another thing, because I wanted to show you just one of the resources in Engaging Congress in the executive branch and do an activity with that. But I really want to show you this video, because it is this could have been a great video that we showed before Dr. Adler did his presentation, because it was a perfect lead-in and a perfect conclusion. So Tim, okay, there you go. So Tim, go ahead and click on resources and videos. I think we're going to go just down to the videos directly instead of to the Engaging Congress. And scroll down. There it is. They're filling in. Scroll down till you see Engaging Congress. Okay, and then down to, should be one more, the executive branch and presidential power. And did you check the button when you shared your screen to share video, to share audio?
Let me make sure I update that.
Look at all those tabs he has open.
I know I do way too much, don't I?
I closed all mine before we did.
Let's do this. Make sure I get you the right screen.
Thanks all of you for hanging in there. I appreciate it. This video is only 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then we'll just do a conclusion, because I know you want to have your dinner, you want to go outside. Okay, down to Engaging Congress, and there you go, executive branch. Go ahead and hit
Congress
that little button.
and the President. Our Constitution was created under the theory that power would be shared equally between our 3 branches of government. But are they really? Some believe the balance of power has shifted in favor of the executive branch. They argue that Congress defers too often to the president, neglecting its own oversight responsibilities. It has become common for the president to establish policy through executive orders instead of waiting for Congress to take action. President Truman's integration of the military in the 1950s is one example of this. Another constitutional role presidents are expanding at the expense of Congress is as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Only Congress has the power to declare war, but here again the two branches clash. In the name of national defense, presidents have been bypassing Congress on a regular basis and committing U.S. troops overseas. As a result, Congress felt the need to reassert its responsibility for declaring war. With passage of the War Powers Act during the Vietnam War, Congress required the president to get permission before sending troops into an armed conflict. President Nixon vetoed the War Powers Act, thinking it was a congressional encroachment on the power of the president. But Congress disagreed and overrode Nixon's veto. It hasn't worked, and presidents have continued to send troops overseas to places like Afghanistan and Iraq without seeking congressional approval. Congress has not relinquished all its checks on the president. One place Congress retained its power is by delaying or refusing to confirm presidential nominations of cabinet members, judges, or Supreme Court justices. The use of its impeachment power is another way Congress can check the president's growing power. Presidents Johnson, Nixon, Clinton, and Trump all faced impeachment. Our system was designed to have checks and balances so no one branch of government could grow too powerful. But are these checks working? How do we maintain our system of checks and balances when the relationship between the Congress and the president is more about political power than governing?
Thank you, Tim. And if we can go back to the PowerPoint real quick, Joseph, I hope that you guys see why I thought this is like a great lead in or lead out from Professor Adler's talk, because we really touched even War Powers Act, all those things. Go ahead to the next slide, Tim. All those things that he was touching on. And you can see that we made it current enough that we included actually in the text. Keep going to the next one, Tim, of the primary source that I'm going to have you look at here. We had to change the text after January, after January 6th. So each of the primary sources and all the interactive we have always have one of these prompt questions or one of these questions that you could use as a bell ringer. You could use it as a homework reflection. You could use it on your test. So in this case, for the primary source I'm going to show you is what is the best way to maintain the balance of power between the president and Congress. Next slide. And here, we're not going to do the image analysis because we ran out of time, but I was going to ask you to kind of observe and reflect about this image. And then here is where you would drag and drop onto the primary source. And you can see the finger is showing you there where you pinch in and out. So go ahead to the next one. And here is like whenever we dragged it in. In this particular case, you can see we've got the glossary terms as a summons, but this is the Sergeant at Arms of the Senate issuing a subpoena to Andrew Johnson to appear at his impeachment trial. So next slide. And after the students have done their analysis, we have these dig deepers for every one of the primary sources, which then gives more background information and content, because initially the three questions that you were asked were only about things that you could observe and deduce from looking at the primary source itself. So here we're now giving more background, and here I think is where we had to change it to plural for Trump. It's actually not in this version that is up, so I have to remind them that they need to do the update to include 2021. Next. And oh, that is the last one. So I just was going to kind of end at this moment. So I know that puts us just a few minutes over, thanks to technology. Thanks to all of you who hung in there. And I hope that you found a good resource. I'll try to turn on my camera for a minute here. I hope that you found some good resources and you're now aware of some more things that you might use in your class for teaching about the executive branch and other parts of government. My email should be, anywhere, eosborn@iu.edu. feel free to reach out to me. We have free classroom giveaways for your classes because we have little squeeze heads of like the votes for women and a few other ones. I'm going to turn off my video again because I just got that unstable message. So thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. I wish I was seeing you in person because as a teacher like you guys, I thrive off that energy of being together, but we're all doing the best we can.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Osborn. It was great to see the useful, great teaching resource online, perfect for now, and knowing it's produced right here in Indiana. So I think that makes it even cooler too. And so I'm sure our teachers are going to be able to use these strategies and resources with their students. So thanks again for your time and sharing the program with us.
Thanks, guys. Nice seeing all of you and hopefully to see you in person soon at another project or program.
Thank you. So just my closing and thank you.